We are going to blow the shofar. Yesterday, we sorely missed hearing the shofar. But the first thing I want to do is learn a little bit about what we're doing. Right? This is going to be a little technical. I like the technical stuff. I like the particulars. There's interesting things about the larger meaning, but sometimes I like to get down to the nitty gritty and just like, why do we blow the shofar the way we do? If I were to ask you, like, what are the sounds? Go ahead, don't be embarrassed. What are the sounds of the shofar? Sound them out. Yeah. No, that's saying it. Sound them out. That's right. That makes one sound. Tekiah. Good. Don't feel sad. Don't feel like embarrassed. Right? What's the other? Another one. Good. What's that one?
I don't know.
That's Trua.
Trua.
Trua. Let's get another one. We got one more. Good. Excellent. Right? We almost don't even need the shofar. That one is called shari. Right? So, right, we blow the shofar. We probably, I guess many of you probably it's not your first time ever in shul, and you're used to hearing, and my guess is you probably know the order. Which one comes first? Tekiah. Woo! Right? And then a little bit of mix in the middle, we're going to explain that, and then the end is or a long one, an extra one. Okay? So I want to learn a little bit of how that came to be, because there's a really interesting story. If you can turn to page 7, we're going to do some traditional learning, which is really like this is what I do for my life. I teach Mishnah and Talmud. I've been doing that for 30 years or so, and this is one of my favorite topics to teach. And it really gets into a little bit of like, how did Jewish practice get to be the way it is today? I think that's a fascinating topic. Welcome, great to see you guys. All right, so we're going to learn, the first thing we're going to look at is the Mishnah. Okay? It's all straightforward on the top of your page. The Mishnah is like the earliest text of Jewish law after the Bible. Right? We've got the Bible, and then in around the year, let's say 100 CE, pops up this group of people that are usually known today as the rabbis, and they're the ones who set the tone for Judaism as we observe it today. Right? If you read the Bible, like, it doesn't sound all that much like what we do. Like sacrifices, a lot of purity laws. It's very strange. And then you read the Mishnah and the Talmud, and they have a much more strong emphasis on things that are more familiar to us. Jewish observance, Shabbat, prayer, much more like the types of behavior that we come to expect, although things have changed a lot because this is close to 2,000 years old. So, the Bible we saw yesterday calls Rosh Hashanah Yom Tru'ah, the day of blessing. So if you translate that into behavior, it seems like we got to blow some kind of instrument. Now we talked about the hints, that the instrument that we're going to use is a shofar, a horn, and not a trumpet. A horn made of an animal. Not going to go. Next year we'll talk about why the ram's horn, but that's what we use. We use a ram's horn, we don't use a cow's horn. Okay? Not going to go into it. Say that first. That's the thing. Elsewhere in the Torah, there's a hint that there are two different kinds of sounds. Right? I am not a trumpet player, but a shofar is a very rudimentary instrument. It would seem that likely the way to make two different notes would be the length of the note. I don't know how much tunes you can get, how many different tones you can get out of a simple shofar, but you can get different lengths. So at one point in the Torah it says, do a tekiah and don't do a trua. So what we can use from there is that there are at least two notes. Tekiah and trua. That's all you can really get from the Bible, from the Torah itself. So I want to look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah reads as follows. I'm going to read it. The order of the class, by the way, in Hebrew, that is Seder. Same word as the Seder, but in order. 3 sets of 3 each. Right? Meaning, the core mitzvah is to have 3 times 3. Now you might ask, why 3 times 3? I don't have an answer. I had a teacher once who used to say, whenever I would ask, why that number, he would say, it's a magical number. Right? And I was like, all the numbers are magical numbers, right? But if you think about it really, like, between 1 and 10, what are the numbers that 3 and 7. Right? I don't know why. I don't think if someone had told me 4 and 8, fine, but it does feel like 3 and 7 appear a lot in religions. And there's something, maybe it's that like a table can't stand without 3. But for whatever reason, they decided there are 3 sets of each. And then the next line says the length of a tekiah is equal to 3 truas, and the length of a trua is equal to 3 yivavot. I can't translate that because we're going to see that later on. But you can see here that they're talking about how long do you make these notes. The Mishnah seems to know that there's something called a tekiah and something called a trua, and it's trying to dictate how long those are. Okay, we'll skip the next 2 lines.
How come we don't know what Yevavot means?
So it's very interesting. You know what? Hold off on that for a second. I am very fascinated by that question, though, because it's always very interesting to know how do we know what we think we know. I'm always interested in how do we know what words mean. Right? Usually we know what words mean because we use them every day, and we just love speaking them. But when you look at a foreign, I read a fascinating book this year about the Rosetta Stone, which is a fascinating tale. How did we learn to read the Rosetta Stone? It took like 50 years to figure it out. So it's a good question, and there are a lot of words in ancient Hebrew that we sort of lost the meaning from. But some of them we just retained generation after generation. But I didn't translate it because it's a hard word to translate. The same way tekiah, if someone asked me to translate it, it's hard to translate those words. Probably the best translation would just be to go, woo! All right. Only going to the Babylonian Talmud, which is a commentary on the Mishnah. All right. So the Babylonian Talmud quotes the Mishnah. The length of a trua is equal to the length of 3 yevavot. And then the Gemara asks, in other words, the Talmud, isn't the talk of the length of a trua equal to the length of 3 shramim? So there you get a different word. Is it 3 yevavot, or is it 3 shramim? I'm not answering what those are because I don't really know exactly what those are. So Abaye, which is a sage from Babylonia, said, in this matter, the Tanaim, the early sages in the Mishnah, certainly disagree. And now we're going to do a little, this is hopefully going to answer your question, right? We're going to do a little linguistic research. As it is written, it is a day of sounding, shua, that's the verse we read yesterday, the shofar to you. The Torah uses the word shua. And we translate this verse in Aramaic. Aramaic was an ancient language that most people in the Middle East spoke. It was the lingua franca, if you will. It is a day of yivavati. So in the translation of the Torah, shua gets translated into Aramaic as yivavah. Right? That's one way, by the way, to learn what a language means is to figure out in another language. Right? If I show you a word in a language you don't know, but then you have a translation into a language you do know, so you can correspond them, and that's how linguistics works. Okay, that's how they figured out the Rosetta Stone and other things. And it is written about the mother of Sisera. Sisera is a foreign king who gets killed in the book of Judges. Through the window she looked forth and wailed. She cried. And that in Hebrew is v'teyabev. And you might see yavav, yavev, it's the same word. So we've gone from Hebrew to Aramaic, back to Hebrew. The mother of Sisera. One sage, now we're going to talk about crying. It sounds like what she did was cry. Her son was just killed. One sage holds that this means moanings, broken sighs, as in the bless called shvarim. And one sage, the Tana of the Mishnah, the author of the Mishnah, holds that it means whimpers, as in the short blasts called tiruot. Right? So here what we get is a little bit of linguistic research. Right? The origins of Trua get to the mother of Sisera. Very interesting. She's not Jewish, she's not Israelite, right? But she's crying. And the Trua is a crying note. Right? That's already there in the Gemara, in the Talmud. Right? If you think about the tekiah, what kind of a note is the tekiah? What does it sound like? The image? If I had to ask you, what does it make you feel when you hear woo? Strong. Or maybe you might make that kind of sound in a call or in war. Right? The shofar blasts are associated with war. Trumpets are still, to this day, I think, associated with a war call. The tekiah is a strong note for strength. And it's mixed in the middle with a note of crying, which is, I think, fascinating, encapsulating of what we are doing here in Rosh Hashanah. On the one hand, it's a show of strength and pride. We're here. We've made it through another year. On the other hand, there's also sort of weeping at our fragility and the fact that at some point it's all going to be over. And crying can come in two different forms. People cry differently. The usual way of understanding this is the shvarim is sort of a groaning cry. In Hebrew it's called groaning. I mean, if you have young kids, right, there's always like the different wails a young child makes. Right? There's the well, that would be more of the staccato sound. Okay, so you've got the shvarim. The image I want you to remember is that the shvarim and the shul, we call today shvarim and shula, are two different versions of crying. Now, last little piece, we're not going to read all of the next text, but the last little piece is like, why do we do more than 3 notes? David is going to blow the shofar in about 2 minutes for us, but there's a little bit of confusion. Which is supposed to be that middle note? Is it supposed to be the groaning 3 slow moans? Or is it supposed to be the staccato? I don't know. I just remember my kids when they were little having both very different kinds of cries, and oftentimes it would move from one type of cry to another type of cry once you start paying attention to them. I don't know. It usually was in the beginning before you noticed you were crying, it would do the moaning. And then once you came over and gave them a little attention, then it would break out into like full-fledged wailing, like staccato sound. So Rabbi Abahu instituted in Caesarea. Caesarea is still a modern city of Israel, on the coast of Israel, and Rabbi Abahu was there in the 4th century. First the tekiah, and then, let's skip the whole words, next 3 shvarim, followed by a trua. I'm not going to read the rest of it, followed by another tekiah in the end. Basically what Rabbi Abahu did was sort of include them all, which is really a beautiful compromise. He said, like, look, some people interpret it that way, some people interpret it this way. We're going to do it both ways. And in the end, in the rest of the paragraph, you learn that, well, we're going to do it with the 2 notes, but maybe that's not so good, so we'll also do it with the 1 note of just shvarim, and we're also going to do it once with just the shula. Right? So that's the way, in a very brief fashion, everybody seems to have always known about the tekiah, the war sign. The tekiah begins and ends each set. We were unclear about the middle, so we do 3 variations. We do shvarim shula, both of them, and then we just do shvarim, and then we just do trua. Right? The tekiah gedola is sort of an embellishment. You're a good tekiah gedola, I'm sure, but it's an embellishment mostly for your entertainment. It's not really a separate meal. It's just a longer version of the tekiah. All right. Any questions before we get ahead? Go ahead. All right, so we are going to turn to page 8. We're going to rise. We are going to go straight into the shofar blowing. I will be calling out the notes for David Krieger to read. He will be reciting the brachot in the beginning, and then we will go through the shofar. We are going to hopefully, do one more set of shofar blasts at the very end. Okay.
I didn't know there were rules.
There's always rules.
Should have done that before.
All right, we do bracha.
Yep. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shechachiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
Amen. Tekiah. Shvarim trua. Tekiah. Shvarim trua. Shvarim trua. Page 9. Shvarim. Shvarim. Tekiah. Trua. Tekiah. Tekiah. Trua. Tekiah. Tekiah. Trua. Tekiah Gedola. Let's once again on page 9, the English and the red up there. May it be your will, our God and God of our ancestors, that the cries of the shofar rise up to your throne, and that they serve as atonement for all our sins. Baruch atah, Master of mercy. Yashikah to David. It is true there is usually a little bit of things to say in between, so I think you're doing good. It's hard. We'll go straight to Baruch. Okay, we are going to move on to.
Yeah, they do different.
Yeah, we'll see. We're going to move on to page 10 with the Baruch, and we're going to go from the Baruch to the Shema, and then I'll say a little bit about the Amidah when we get to that part. So the Baruch, we respond. Sandy will do the first part, then we do the second line, and then he does the second line again, and then we'll say the bracha, the blessing right afterwards. We'll try to say that together.
I just have a quick question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, my son's religious, and we were talking about the shofar and people visiting hospitals. I said, oh, they have to have 100 notes, and then he said, I only have to have 30 notes. We only have 27 notes. So what's the difference between the 27 and the 30?
Okay, great question.
What was the question?
I'll repeat the question, right? What's your name?
Art.
Art mentioned that there is a custom to do 100 notes. 100 notes is a little bit of an embellishment. The core we saw was that you need to do 9 notes, but because we don't know that middle one, we end up doing more than 9 notes because of our doubt of whether the middle one is shvarim or chua or both of them. I often thought that to myself too. We only did 27, but in the note counting, when you do shvarim chua together, they count as 2. So you have a set of 12. Right, Tekiah, shvarim chua. Tekiah, that's 4 times 3, 12. And then Tekiah, shvarim times 3, Tekiah, that's 9. Tekiah, shua times 3, that's another 9. 9 plus 9 is 12, and 18 is 12, and 12 is 30. So that's how you get to the 30. Right? That's the minimum, by the way. It's very good you point out. What we just heard is the minimum you need to do to have fulfilled the mitzvah of the shofar. Right? And generally in shul we'll do a little bit more than that, but 30 is the minimum. So you have all fulfilled the mitzvah of hearing the shofar. Alright, we're going to move on to, but thank you for your question. We're going to move on to page 10 in the bar.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom. Alright, you can sit down. We're going to do the Shema now together.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha Bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשופך ובקומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
Okay, we're going to move on to the Amidah. I think today, a little bit different from yesterday, we're going to do the beginning of the Amidah together, and then I think we're going to put aside the rest of it for today, and we will move on. But as I explained yesterday, the Amidah is the central prayer that is always recited at least 3 times a day. And today, we'll try, hopefully if we have enough time, we'll get a little bit of a flavor of a different part of the Musaf later, which is the second Amidah recited in the morning. So let's rise on page 10. Please join along with the words that you know. And if you don't know, then we'll learn. That's what we're here for.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Ha'el HaGadol Hagibor ve'anora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekonei Hakol Vezocher Chasdei Avot Umevi Goel Livnei Vneihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava
Page 11.
Zochreinu L'chaim Melech Hafetz B'chaim V'chotvenu B'sefer HaChaim V'chotvenu B'sefer HaChaim Le'manecha Elohim Chaim Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Eitim Atah Rav Lehoshia Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayim Eitim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofech Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocham al Yevurot Umitzom Elach Melech Meimitu Mechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua Michamocha Avarachamim Zocher Yetzurav L'chaim Berachamim V'ne'emanata L'chayot Meitim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei HaMeitim.
Bottom of page 11.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאיך, V'karazeh ve'amar Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevot, Melech Kol Haaretz Kevodo. Az bekol Rosh Gadol, Adir v'chazak mashmi'im kol, Minasim leumat serafim, leumatam, Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimkomo Mimekom Chamalkeinu Tzofia V'timloch Aleinu Ki mechakim Anachnu Lach Matai Timloch Betzion Bekarov Be'ameinu Le'olam Va'et Yishkon Titzgadal v'titzgadash b'toch Yerushalayim yihircha ledor v'ador ulenetzach netzachim oy v'eineinu tirena malchutecha kadavar amor b'shirei yosecha al yedei David Meshiach tzidkecha Yimelach Adonai le'olam Elohayich Tzion Ledor vador, ledor vador, hallelujah.
Page 13.
Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God lecha. Ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, Kedushatcha, Kedushatcha nakdish. Ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, Kedushatcha, Kedushatcha nakdish. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador nagid God lecha v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush le'olam le'olam va'et ki el melech gadol gadol v'kadosh gadol v'kadosh ata.
Okay, you may be seated. We're going to sing Sim Shalom together on page 16, and then we're going to sing a little piece together on the bottom of page 16. The transliteration is on the bottom of 17. So, Sim Shalom, page 16.
Sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Chein v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Barcheinu avinu kulanu ke'echad ve'or panecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Ki be'or panecha natarta lanu Adonai Eloheinu Torat chaim ve'avat chesed tzedaka uvracha ve'rachamim ve'chayim ve'shalom Sim shalom tova uvracha ba'olam. Sim shalom tova uvracha V'tov beinecha levarech et amecha Yisrael b'chol eit u'b'chol shah bishlomecha sim shalom tova u'bracha ba'olam sim shalom tova u'bracha.
Bottom of page 16.
Besefer Chaim bracha v'shalom u'farnasa tova nizacher v'nikatev lefanecha anachnu v'chol amcha beit Yisrael l'chaim tovim u'leshalom.
Alright, we're going to be on page 7, actually on page 18. You might have noticed that one of my favorite prayers we didn't say yesterday, and that is the Avinu Malkeinu. Alright, there's a beautiful tune. I don't know if anybody likes the band Fish. No? They play a great version of this. I actually never seen them play it in concert. They don't play it that often. It was a beautiful, haunting tune. For some reason, we don't say Avinu Malkeinu on Shabbat. I don't know why. There are a lot of like little weird tidbits in Tefillot. I get asked about them all the time. I work at Camp Ramah in New England over the summer, and every time someone comes up to me, I know they want to ask something strange about Tefillot. I always tell them, you can just say, "Hi Josh, how you doing? You having a good day?" And then ask me a question. They ask me questions all the time. I don't usually know the answers to them. Sometimes it's as little as like, if you're a baseball fan, there's just certain ways you do things. And why do you do them that way? Well, why do we sing, take me out the ballgame in the 7th inning and not the 6th inning? I don't know. Maybe there is a reason, but I don't know. So I don't really know why we do Avinu Malkeinu. Maybe someday I'll figure it out. But we don't do it. No one does Avinu Malkeinu on Shabbat, so it's one of those a few things that we missed doing yesterday. So we are going to do it today. I think we're just going to sing the last little bit. That's the familiar tune. The rest of the prayer, a lot of it, the part that I quoted here is asking God to inscribe us in a good life for next year. But we're going to sing together the last part. It's in the transliteration on page 18.
Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Vaneinu Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Vaneinu Yen Banu Maasim Aseh Imanu Tzedakah v'chesed Aseh Imanu Tzedakah v'chesed Ve'yoshienu Aseh Imanu Tzedakah v'chesed Aseh Imanu Tzedakah v'chesed Ve'yoshienu.
The prayer means, I didn't put the translation here, but our Father, our King, referring to God, grant mercy on us, answer us, because we've never done good enough. When you really, if you start to self-examine yourself, I don't know about you, but I always feel like I can always do more, I can always be better, I can always do more things, and more good things. And there's almost always, at somewhere, a feeling of inadequacy. But it doesn't stop us from recognizing that we can still ask for something, even if we weren't perfect. And so we ask God to grant us charity and mercy and to protect us. Because I don't think that there's really anybody in the world who's perfect, who does everything right all the time. And it's okay to admit that and still to ask for the right. Beautiful prayer. All right, we're going to continue. We're going to continue with the Torah service. I'll ask for, prepare to raise your hand, because we're going to need some new aliyot today. So we'll do that in a couple minutes. So let's rise on page 18 for the Torah service.
Ein kamocha va'elohim Adonai ve'ein kemasecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha bechol dor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yavarech et amo v'shalom avarachamim eitiv avitzoncha et Zion tivne chomot Yerushalayim kivecha levad batachnu melech el ram venisa Adon olamim.
Need a volunteer to come open the ark. Just come on up. Come on down. We're on page 19. Wait till it's open.
Vayehi b'tzaron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha ve'yanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'devar Adonai mi'Yerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato.
So the next line in the middle of page 19, you might notice there's one other thing we skipped yesterday because it was Shabbat. I don't know why we don't do it on Shabbat, but we will do it today. It talks about God's mercy. It's a line that comes in the Torah when God forgives the people for worshiping the golden calf. This is part of Moses' prayer to God, and it's recited in many occasions.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Yemet, Notzer Chesed l'Alafim, Nosei Avon v'Fesha, V'Chata v'Nakeh.
We're at the Shema, still on page 19. We'll respond to Sam.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'Norah Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'Norah Shemo.
Gadol Adonai Iti, Uneravema Shemo Yachdav. Adonai Hagidula,
Ve'agevura, Tiferet. Adonai Hamamlecha Rosh Romemu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Ve'ishtachavu Ve'Adonai HaKadoshu Romemu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Ve'ishtachavu Ve'Adonai Kadoshu Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. All right. Need someone to help you?
No, it's not.
All right, you can see this now. We're going to do the second part of the Torah reading that we started to talk about yesterday. The Torah reading today is probably one of the most memorable, disturbing stories in the Torah. Just very briefly, Abraham miraculously had a son. He was 99, his wife was 90. They had been praying and waiting all of their lives to have a son. And the very next story, God goes and tells Abraham to, and the words here are just, you're pointing at the way he phrases it. In page 22, you can see, please take your son, your only one, whom you love. It's like God's almost rubbing it in there. Take you the most precious thing to you in life, Yitzchak, and offer him up as a burnt offering. Meaning go and sacrifice him. Right off. It's brutal. There have been, people have been talking about the story ever since. There are questions, and I think, rather than tell you they know the answer, but these are hard questions. Did God intend for Abraham to offer it? What kind of test is this? Did Abraham know that he was going to, in the end of the story, I think you're probably familiar with it, at the very last minutes, God says to Abraham, don't do that. An angel comes out of the heavens, don't do that. Don't offer you up your son as a sacrifice. Take a ram, as a ram can be caught next door in the bushes. Take that and offer it to sin. I don't know. You can debate this till the very end, whether Abraham knew that was going to happen. The rabbis tend to think he didn't. The rabbis tend to think he really wanted to sacrifice his son. We don't know how old Isaac was. Did Isaac know what was going to happen? Did the servants going around him know what was going to happen? I don't know whether Abraham passed the test. It's described as a test. By the way, the name for this minion, Nisayon, in Hebrew means test, and it comes from that word. Nisa, Abraham, Elohim Nisa. God tried Abraham. It was a trial. I don't know. I've been debating this for 30 years in my own head. Did Abraham fail the test? Did he pass the test? He never has a relationship with Isaac after that. Hard to tell, but that's just, the Bible doesn't tell us all of its stories. Sarah dies in the very next chapter. It's a tremendous disruption in the family, and it's a little hard, I find it very difficult to come up with concrete answers to it. But there's one take on the story that I think, to me, is absolute. And that is, in the end, God says, don't do that. The trial, I'll admit, is beyond imagination, beyond cruel. But in the end, I do think you have to come away from the story with God doesn't want that kind of behavior. This is the very beginning of the Jewish people. And there's a message in here that crazy religious zeal, what we might call crazy fundamentalism, we were speaking a little bit about that, is not something that God wants out of us. There are other episodes in the Torah that also seem to express that. And it's something that when I look around the world, I fear that the people who are most religious are oftentimes most crazy about it and think it's too far to the extreme. And that really is disturbing. I think that something about religion attracts that extremism. It's not just in Judaism, in Christianity, in Islam. I'm not familiar all that well with other religions, but this unbridled passion to think that you know 100% what God wants out of you, and that you are the conduit of God's will in the world, that you have unfiltered access to 100% what God thinks, and that you're going to do that in the world is very scary. Right? I actually think this goes along with what I taught in the beginning. Right? Something as mundane as how do you do the tequila? Well, we don't really know that. Right? We know vaguely we're supposed to do tequila or Rosh Hashanah. Right? And tequila are not something that are ever going to harm somebody. But we really don't know. We don't have access to what exactly God wants. But we do know what other people need, what other people want. And I think that's part of the lesson I take away from the story. I admire Abraham, somewhere in me I admire Abraham's zeal, his passion. Can you imagine just being so dedicated to something that you would be willing to give up the most precious thing in the world? I can't imagine that, but I can still somewhere in my mind, there are, to take it in another way, there are people out there who do things that are very extreme. I wouldn't want to do that myself. I wouldn't want my children, I wouldn't want my family to do that. But I have some admiration for them. Something like climbing a mountain that's just insanely difficult. Right? It's not something I think people should be doing, but I admire that zeal. But what I do think the story is telling us is that zeal and that passion should be directed somewhere else. When I think about some of the people I admire most in the world, an organization, for instance, comes to mind. There's an organization called Matznat Chaim. Matznat Chaim is a religious Jewish organization that works for kidney donation. We all know the difficulties. You might know some people who don't have a kidney or need a kidney. It is extremely difficult to get a kidney donation from somebody who died. And it is possible to donate kidneys while you're alive. There are some dangers. I'm not a doctor. I don't want to go into it. So that people who are so passionate about helping somebody else and so passionate to start an organization to encourage somebody to be so self-sacrificing to offer their own kidney, that's religious zeal that I can tremendously admire. Even if I can't, I have not donated a kidney. I've thought about it, but I haven't done it. People who are deeply, deeply religious, but have tremendous passion for helping others in need. I mean, I think we heard a little bit of that when we heard David speak yesterday about how passionate the synagogue is and how passionate he is about helping people who are hungry. Imagine if religious dedication, instead of being pointed at hatred to others, at certainty of the rightness of one's own cause, but was dedicated to 100%, my mission in life is to help make other people's lives better. Right? That's, I think, some of the lessons I learned from this year. But it is a difficult story. It has, unfortunately, been a paradigm for people to be religiously extreme. And I've got to be frank with you, when I look around in our world, the people who are usually identified as religious are oftentimes the most extreme, and not usually the most extreme in the best ways. So I hope, it's almost been sort of my life's goal, is to get people to be passionately interested in being moderate. It's almost like conundrum, right? How can you be passionately tolerant, absolutely dedicated to believing that both sides can be right? It's a hard task, right? It's a lot easier to be certain, but I don't think it's impossible. So something to think about when we read the Torah. All right, we need 3 aliyot. A word about aliyot. It might be a little scary. The purpose of this minyan is to make you feel comfortable, right? Not to feel that if you're doing something you've never done before, you're scared to do it. This is a great opportunity. I mean, I think I speak for everybody. It's fine if you don't do it perfectly, if you stumble on the words, if you go into the second line and you're supposed to do the first line again. This is the place to try things out. I would like to create a safe atmosphere where everybody feels good about trying, or at least anyone needs to try something new. And I do realize it's scary to come up in front of everybody and be doing it. So, can we get 3 volunteers, not the same people who did yesterday, for aliyot? Men, women, you only have to do above bar mitzvah. That's all that is. Volunteer one. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Very good. And you gotta get hard by lifting up the Sefer Torah. I saw you had your hand up there. Here. Can you lift the Torah? Yeah. All right. Yeah, lift her and someone to help wrap. You had one yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
You had one. Tony didn't come up at all yesterday. Wrap it. Very. It's an easy one. I mean, we could. You want one of that? Okay, we got it wrapped. Thank you very much. I don't remember exactly each one, so we are going to continue with the Torah reading. It's found at the bottom of page 21. All right. And if you need, while you have this transliteration here, if you're stuck, I'm happy to help. Pointer. You got the place?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, take my size.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayehi achar hadvarim ha'ele ve'Elohim nisat Avraham vayomer elav Avraham vayomer hineni vayomer kach na'at binchat yachidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak velech lecha el eretz haMoriah v'aleu sham le'olah al hachadarim asher amar elecha Yeshkem Avraham baboker v'chvosh et chamaro v'yikach et shnei narav ito ve'et Yitzchak beno v'vaka atzei olah v'yakom v'yelech el hamakom asher malo Elohim.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shkach. Alright, Shani. What did I didn't call you by your name? Oh. Sorry, I forgot the name, so. Yitzhak Ben Meir. Yamod Yitzhak Ben Meir, Shani. That's you.
Okay.
It's in this area.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. B'yom hashlishi vayisa Avraham et einav vayaret hamakom merachok vayomer Avraham el narav shulachem po im hachamor v'ani v'nar nelecha ad kol v'nishtachaveh v'nashuv aleichem v'yikach Avraham tatzei olah v'yasem al Yitzchak beno v'yikach be'ado et ha'esh v'et ha'machelet וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר אביו, ויאמר הנני בני, ויאמר הנה האש והעצים, ויעשה לילדה. ויאמר אברהם אלוהים, ירא לו עשה לילדה בני, וילכו שניהם יחדיו.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shkach. Alright, Shlishi. Yamod. Avram Yitzchak Ben Shul. Yisrael Pinchas. Avram Yitzchak. Very aptly.
Can't hold on, I don't. It's like totally lost this one right here.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayavo el
במקום אשר אמר לו אלוהים, ויבן שם אברהם את המזבח, ויערוך את העצים, ויעקוד את יצחק בנו, וישם אותו על המזבח ממעל העצים. וישלח אברהם את ידו, ויקח את המאכלת, לשחוט את בנו. ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר אברהם, ויאמר הנני, ויאמר אל תשלח ידך אל הנער ותעש לו מהומה, כי אתה ידעתי, כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא חסכת את בנך את יחידך ממני. וישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא והנה איל אחר נחש בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את האיל, ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום בהר אדוני יראה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. All right, we're going to lift the Sefer Torah now. It's a heavy Torah. I explained this to you guys yesterday. The Torah is made of parchment, right? We don't use paper. Parchment is heavier. Parchment is from animal skin. It is heavy. So especially when you can see over here the Torah, we're at the beginning, Breshit, we're in the beginning of the Torah. A lot of, are you lefty or right?
Yeah. I'm a right, yeah.
All right, whatever. We'll figure it out. But the good news is somehow parchment technology has improved in the last 50 years. Newer Sifrei Torah are much lighter than older ones. All right, please rise.
Walk over here.
Somebody asked me, one of you guys asked me yesterday, if the Torah falls, do you really have to fast 40 days? So the good news is you don't know. I've never heard of anyone really fasting 40 days. But it is considered a bad omen for the Torah to fall. It happened, I've seen it happen a couple times. Usually what ends up happening is, this happened at the summer camp where I was working. And I pointed out kids aren't fasting 40 days. But it will be a good opportunity to build a better sefer. It actually fell out of the Aron Kodesh. Let's donate tzedakah to build a better Aron Kodesh. So you don't really end up fasting 40 days, but it is something that we should always try hard to avoid the sefer. All right, we're on page 23. We're going to return the Sefer Torah. And maybe we'll talk for a moment about that, and then Sammy's going to chant part of the Time to Tell Gift today. The first one is on page 24. On the bottom of the page, in Hebrew it reads, Uvesh shofar gadol yitzaka. There will be a great blast, a great shofar sound, v'kol dmama daka yishama, and a thin, silent, almost silent voice shall be heard. Now the Hebrew alludes to two different chapters in the Bible. The shofar gadol, the great shofar, is the revelation on Sinai. The shofar goes many moments in the Torah, and one of them is that on Sinai there were great blasts of the shofar heard when the Ten Commandments were given. Anyone know when there's a still silent voice? That is a very tricky question. I love biblical trivia, but I'm not like expecting great expertise in biblical trivia, but I do love Bible. I love trivia in general. So that's a piece of Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet. Right? Elijah the prophet has like a great, he's asking for God's presence, and there's all these great sounds and great wind and an earthquake, and he doesn't experience God in any of those things, but finally a small, still voice is heard, and God is in that small, still voice. It's a beautiful combination of two key moments. I think saying to us that there is great meaning in big events. When you think about, I don't know, you think about some kind of big world event or something that makes tremendous impression on you. I was thinking about maybe like the Queen's funeral. I wasn't quite as into the coronation. I'm not going to get into that, but the Queen's funeral is just an amazing show of pageantry. Very rich in symbols and that's a giant event watched by pretty much everyone around the world. But sometimes you can sense the divine, you can sense something holy, and something as small as like an infant's cry, or maybe the sound of somebody old and perhaps taking their last breath. Small little events, little acts of kindness, things that we experience. The great and big cataclysmic events are hard to experience most of the time, but looking for the holy, for the divine, for something profound in those tiny little moments of kindness, of greatness. I think that's part of what the prayer is saying. Like there was a great sound blown, but what was heard wasn't that great sound. What was really heard was the kol dmama, was that little silent voice. So you can think about your own moments in your own life where maybe something very small touched you, something that maybe no one else in the world would have noticed, but you found it incredibly moving.
Would the silent voice be your ear voice?
Kol dmama daka. In translation here, it's silent.
Because silent
Dmama is
means
almost
it's a
like
thought.
shaking. I don't know if it exactly means, like, how do you describe something as close to silent as possible? I don't know. Do you have any moments? If you want to volunteer and share a moment. I can think of, I'll think of one moment. When we were running the thing the other day, we run together. I can think of, you might see in my bio that I'm a runner, I like to run. I can think of one moment that just was like, of all my years of doing this, I was at the, you can admit this, I was at the end of a half Ironman triathlon. I wasn't feeling so good, and I was cramping up in my calves. But somebody ran by me, and he just stopped for a minute, and he said to me, if you take smaller steps, you'll be able to finish the last two. My first one. I never saw that person again. But he slowed down his own, he didn't worry about himself, he slowed down his own day, probably took a couple minutes off his own time, and offered me like a little bit of help. I wasn't going to be able to thank him in the end. And with his little bit of advice, I was able to finish. I'm proud of myself. It's just like a tiny little thing. I think that was 15 years ago. I looked for him afterwards. I don't remember what he looked like. I couldn't find him. He probably doesn't remember. But there's like little moments in a person's life that mean something. That you might remember 20, 25 years later. So think is in your work. Okay, we're on page 24, and then we're going to do the top of page 25.
ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע, ומלאכים יחפזון, וכידורי ידה יאחזון, ומלאכים יחפזון, וכידורי ידה יאחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, לבכות עצמם הרעום בדין, כי לא יזכו בעיניך בדין. וכל מי עולם יעברו לפניך כבני מרום, כבקרת רועה עדרו, מעביר צאנו תחת שבטו. כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה ותבכות נפש כל חי, ותחתוך קצבה לכל בריאה, ותכתוב את גזר דינם.
Page 25.
ושופר גדול ייתקע,
Still 24.
וכל דממה דקה יישמע, ומלאכים יחפזון, וכידורי ידה יאחזון, בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. בראש השנה ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון.
Let's read the last paragraph there where it says we come from dust. Let's read that together. We come from dust and return to dust. We labor by our lives to bread. They are like broken shards, like dry grass, like a withered flower, like a passing shadow and a vanishing cloud, like a breeze that passes, and like dust that scatters, like a fleeting dream. But you are the king who lives eternal. We're gonna, you might have noticed we didn't read the entire prayer at the top of the page, but we're gonna do on Yom Kippur. You might have noticed that there's a modern song. Anyone familiar with Leonard Cohen? With Who by Fire? Yeah, it's a beautiful song. We're gonna look at that on Yom Kippur. A beautiful song inspired by Una Tokya, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in Yom Kippur. I think, I don't know, as I get older, the Una Tokya resonates with me more and more. I think it's probably very natural to start thinking about what happens as you get older, as your parents get older. It's very natural for Una Tokya to be a prayer. Okay, let's turn to page 26. We are just going to give a little bit of a discussion of the Musaf. We're not going to, as I said before, we're not going to be doing the entire Musaf, because it's very long, but the special part of Rosh Hashanah Musaf is that there are 3 blessings that are recited only on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and only during Musaf. They're very unique. Actually very interesting. The Amidah for Rosh Hashanah is actually longer than the Amidah for Yom Kippur. But these are 3 special brachot, blessings, that were created specifically for this day. And they consist, I didn't include them all in here, they consist of a lot of biblical quotations about certain themes, and then a blessing in sort of more rabbinic language. The first theme is God's kingship. Now, I want to say something over here that I think that in the modern world, sometimes it's very hard to constantly talk about God. Probably a lot of us, when we think about what do we mean about God, we know, I mean, I don't know if all of you think this, I know I'm not supposed to believe in some old guy sitting on a when someone says God, I can't help but still think a little bit about an old guy sitting on a mountain, because maybe that's like an image that caught my eye when I was a kid. Like, again, I know that's not really correct. No one in their right mind will believe that God is some old man sitting on a mountain. But it's very hard for us, and I think in the scientific worlds, I'm assuming everybody here, most of you probably went or will go to college, and you learn science, and we have a very scientific view of the world. And a traditional God language is hard for us to relate to. And the prayers, I think that's one of the challenges of prayers. The prayers are very God-oriented. So I'm always asking myself questions about, how does the author see the world? What human emotions can resonate with me, even if I don't have a literal belief in God? I'm not able to really express to you what I think it means by believing in God, but it's complicated and personal, and not something that is easily, I think, dictated from above. But I do think that the prayers often are written by people who have deep observations of the world, deep emotions, some of the things we've already spoken about. I'll give you an example, like, in a couple of these. Malchut is about God's kingship. What do you mean by God's kingship? I think that there's a question that we still need to ask, is that we're not the center of the universe. We might think that human beings are the center of the universe, but we also know at the same time that we're not. Right? It's weird to think about this when we think about climate change. The world isn't going to go away. The earth will keep spinning. It might not be habitable for humans, but the world won't get destroyed. We might not be able to live here. And that's, I think, part of what I think about. There's something beyond human beings. You might call that the world, you might call that nature, you might call that love, you might call that universalism. There are different ways of thinking about that, but the prayer of Malchut, I think, humbles us and gets us thinking about that. I'm not going to go into the other two themes. The other theme is you will know, remember in history, and the final one is redemption. There's a lot of important themes and quotes in some of the pages about the importance of remembrance, what do we remember for, and thinking about a better future. The shofar is supposed to bring us out of history and thinking about hope. And hope is another, believe me, I think I hear this from everybody I talk to. It's hard to be hopeful in our world. It might have always been hard for people to be hopeful. I'm not a fan of thinking that the world is worse now than it ever was. I mean, it doesn't seem to be objectively true. 80 years ago in World War II, I would think the world was worse. But I do think that we feel a sense of deterioration and that social cohesion and that values. And it might be every generation feels that, but it doesn't change the fact that we feel that way. But it is important in times of difficulty. I think I'm speaking to some people that all we can do is hope. I live in Israel. I'm not going to talk today about how difficult times are in Israel right now. But losing hope is a dangerous thing. And the shofar is a symbol of reminding us that without that kind of hope and belief that we can create a better future, then we've sort of lost our way here on earth. We are going to do a couple last bits of prayers here, and then we are going to hear the shofar again. If you want to know why I'm having us blow the shofar again, it is because it's the core mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah, and I feel very strongly that everybody should hear the shofar. I don't know exactly, but there might be a few people here who missed it. You mentioned going around the hospitals. There are people, I suppose, here in Toronto who do that, certainly in Israel. There are people who go to somebody's home if they couldn't make it, they were sick, unable to get there. It's an important mitzvah for everybody, every Jew to hear the shofar. I remember in COVID, there were literally people in my neighborhood walking around, couldn't really go anywhere, people walking around the street, so that every Jew was able to hear and fulfill the mitzvah of the shofar. So we are going to hear the shofar again. We are going to do Kaddish Shalem on page 29. It's a wonderful tune. We didn't get to do it yesterday, so it wouldn't be good if we didn't do it at all. So we're going to do the Kaddish Shalem on page 29, and then we'll go straight into the Aleinu and Warriors of Parish. And then we're here to take the shofar.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba Ve'alma divrach irutei ve'amlich malchutei V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'chayei nechol beit Yisrael Bagala u'bizman kariv ve'imeru Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach Le'lam u'lamei almaya Yitzbarach Yitzbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitzbar ve'yitzramam ve'yitnaseh ve'yitadar ve'yitaleh ve'yitalal Shemei dekudsha Le'ila mikol birchata ve'shirata Tush v'chata v'nechemata damiran me'alma Tush v'chata v'nechemata damiran me'alma ve'imeru Titkabal tzeloton u'voroton lechol Beit Yisrael Kodam avuhon Divishemaya ve'imru amen ve'imeru Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen ve'imeru Ose shalom imromov Yase shalom Aleinu Ve'al kol Yisrael Ve'imeru Amen
Page 30, Ayin.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol L'tetz gedula le'otzeh bereshit Shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot Ve'lo somanu kemishpechot adama Shelo sam chelkeinu kahem Ve'gor aleinu kechol hamonam Ve'anachnu korim mishlachavim u'modim Lifnei melech malchei amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shehu noteh shamayim ve'yosed haaretz U'moshav yekaro v'shamayim imah Ushlinatu zo Begavhei meromim Hu Eloheinu einot Emet malkeinu efezulato Kakatuv betorato Be'adata hayom Be'yashevota elevavecha Ki Adonai hu Elohim B'shamayim imal Ve'al haaretz mitachat einot Ve'nemar Ve'haya Adonai Lemelech al kol haaretz Vayomahu Yeh Adonai echad Ushemo echad.
Mourner's Kaddish is on page 31. If you want to remain standing, please do. If you'd like to sit, that's also fine. And if you're reciting Mourner's Kaddish, please join in. Yitkada v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Ve'amad divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam u'mei omaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh. V'yidadar, v'yidaleh, v'yidalal, shmei dekudesha, b'richu. Re'ela u're'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, damiran v'yama v'imru, amen. Yehi shraba rabba min shamaya, v'chaim alenu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
All right, we are going to do another round of the shofar blowing. Thank you to David for coming again. And then we're going to hear from Margaret, the synagogue president, and then we'll conclude with the Torah. So please rise again for the shofar. Tekiah, Shvarim Shua, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shvarim Shua, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shvarim Shua. Just one last word before Margaret comes up. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the shul, thank Margaret, the board, the rabbis for giving us all this opportunity. And I speak for myself. This was really something I was hoping to be able to do for a long time, to really act as a teacher, to learn with you. I hope we'll continue this over Yom Kippur. We have services on Kol Nidre and then Yom Kippur morning. Hope to see everyone back. But you should know that for me this was really a fun thing to do, and I hope it was fun for you too. So thank you all for your participation. We'll have
Shana Tova. I'm thrilled to see our building full again as we celebrate the Yomim Tovim together with family and friends. This year we mark some exciting milestones. We have our first learning service to enhance our high holiday offerings, and I really hope that you've enjoyed it. We've had the pleasure of having Dr. Rabbi Kulp here, and he's always been an amazing addition to our annual services. We also have our highest attendance number in our family services, necessitating the need to go to the Assembly Hall, which has been very exciting. I hope you take the opportunity to experience pop in and see the other service as well. I stand here in gratitude for the trust placed in me by the senior officers, Board of Governors, and the community to stir this remarkable synagogue, whose values, legacy, and traditions are a part of us all. I am proud to be the second female president of our synagogue and value the lessons and mentorship of the many presidents who have served before me, of which David was the most recent. Look at how happy he is sitting over there. My husband, Andrew, my children, Aaron and Adira, and I have been members for over 14 years. Andrew's grandparents, Aaron and Yetta Kimmel, were founding members of Beth Shalom. And while he may have grown up at Bethesda Synagogue and attended USDS, and we were members as a family for many years, we found our home and our community at Beth Shalom Synagogue. While volunteering at the Kosher Food Bank, the Out of the Cold program, attending the Bar Mitzvah program, the Cantor's Kabbalat Shabbat dinners, and helping to launch our Shin Shanim partnership with the UJA. We have made connections and friendships that will last a lifetime. Beth Shalom, under the leadership of Abe Glowinski and David Krieger, has weathered the worst of the pandemic, and now we can look forward to the future and ensuring we safeguard the legacy of this community for many years to come. Beth Shalom is a house of many communities. We have our minyonaires, our Shabbat morning regulars, our high society, our Shalom learning families, our Bar Mitzvah families, our volunteer groups for the Out of the Cold, Kosher Food Bank, the Peace of Mind, Hesed programs, and many other groups. We strive to meet the needs of our members through the Membership Committee, our Israel Engagement Committee, our Hesed Committee, our Program Committee, and many other committees. I hope that you will take the time to find your community here at Beth Shalom. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are defining moments of the year. I look forward to this time to look back on the 12 months, set goals, reflect, and start fresh. The Board of Governors has done the same by reestablishing the Strategic Planning Committee that was sidelined by the pandemic. We have recognized the need for some time, the importance of strategic planning for Beth Shalom Synagogue's future. Through the process of analysis, stakeholder consultation, surveys, and focus groups, the committee will formulate a plan that will guide us in the coming years. Your participation in this process is vital. I urge you to engage in any of these initiatives when asked. We are all fortunate to be part of a vibrant and innovative synagogue led by our exceptional clergy and Board of Governors. I'm honored to work alongside this group over the next 2 years. I recognize the many challenges facing the greater Jewish community are substantial, but I'm excited for the future of Beth Shalom, and I sincerely hope that you share this optimism. On behalf of my family and myself, I want to wish you all a year of peace, blessings, and good health. I hope the sweetness of these days carries through the year ahead for all of us. Shana Tova Tikatevu. Okay, I think there's a few announcements. I might as well throw those in, right? Okay. So again, we extend our thanks to Dr. Rabbi Joshua Culp and Sammy Moses for leading services this morning, and Yasher Koch to David Krieger for blowing the shofar. Is he still standing? Oh no, there he is, okay. Minhag services tonight are at 7:15, and there will be open seating in the chapel. Havdalah tonight is at 8:07. We look forward to seeing you again for Kol Nidre on Sunday, September 24th at 6:45 p.m. And on behalf of the senior officers and the Board of Governors, I wish you all Shana Tova, a year of peace, good health, and happiness. Thank you. Yasher Koch.
I just want to thank Sammy also. He's a great guy to work with, a lot of fun. Sammy and Sammy's dad has been friends with me for over 30 years, like 33 years. So it's great to see young people up on the bima and leading us, and I hope we can continue to work together for a long time. So Adon Olam is on page 31.
Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Leit Nasa, B'chetzo Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Ve'acharei Kichot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nor Adon Olam, Ve'hu Aya, Ve'hu Oveh, Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara Adon Olam, Adon Olam, Hashem Malach, B'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Leit Nasa, B'chetzo Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Ve'hu Echad, Ve'en Sheni, Ve'am Shilo Le'achbira Adon Olam, Ve'li Reishit, Ve'li Tachlit, Ve'lo Ahos Ve'amisra Adon Olam, Ve'hu Eli, Ve'chai Goali, Ve'tzorcha Li Ve'etzara Adon Olam, Ve'hu Nisi, Umanos Li, Menat Kosi Ve'yomeka Adon Olam, בידו עקיד רוחי ותישן וירא אדון עולם ואם רוחי יביאתי אדוני לי ולא ירא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא להתנשא לחפש הכל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם.
Shana Tova, everyone. Don't forget to drop your books off at the front over here. If you need a PDF, I can send it to you in the mail, and we'll see everybody back on Yom Kippur.